The Dallas Cowboys just dropped a bomb that nobody saw coming this early, and if you're not subscribed to this channel, you're missing breaking news like this the second it happens, so smash that subscribe button right now because we're about to break down exactly what Jerry and Stephen Jones just announced, and trust me, this changes everything for America's team heading into the draft. The Jones family stood in front of reporters today at their pre-draft press conference and made it crystal clear there will be no long-term deal, no contract extension, no negotiations happening before the July 15th deadline because they've decided their star is playing on the franchise tag this season. And honestly, the timing of this announcement is what's blowing my mind right now. Stephen Jones didn't dance around. It didn't leave any room for interpretation. He straight up said they've made their decision, and that decision is franchise tag for this year, which means we're looking at a prove-it situation, and the front office is basically telling this player, we loved what you did last season, but do it again before we give you generational money. Here's the thing that's got me fired up about this whole situation. The Cowboys aren't just saying we'll negotiate and see what happens. They're saying negotiations are off the table completely, which is a massive statement when you really think about what that means for the locker room chemistry and the business side of this organization. We're talking about a player who just came off an incredible season, absolutely balled out, and was a huge part of what made this offense click. And now the front office is essentially saying that one great year isn't enough to earn the bag that other players at his position are getting around the league. The franchise tag number sits right around that $27 million range for this season, which is solid money, don't get me wrong. But when you look at what the top guys at this position are making on long-term deals, we're talking 35 to 40 million per year with massive guarantees and security that the tag just doesn't provide. And here's what nobody's talking about. The Cowboys announcing this before the draft is a strategic move that tells you everything about how they're planning to approach draft night. Because if they were locked into paying this guy long-term, they might feel pressured to go defense or offensive line early, but now they've kept their options wide open. The crazy part is that Stephen Jones mentioned the business aspect of a second big contract and the quote-unquote newness of having this player with the Cowboys as reasons for pumping the brakes. And that newness angle is fascinating to me because it tells you they don't fully trust the consistency yet. According to reports that came out of that press conference, the talks with the player's agent have been super cordial, which means this isn't a toxic situation yet, but you better believe that could change real quick depending on how the player and his camp react to being tagged. David Mulugheta is the agent involved here, and if you know anything about him, you know he absolutely hates the franchise tag and has been vocal about it for years. So even though things are cordial now, there's definitely some tension brewing under the surface. The Cowboys have done deals with Mulugheta before this offseason, so there's a working relationship there, but that doesn't mean he's happy about his client being forced to play on a one-year prove-it deal when the market is exploding at this position. Here's the reality. If this player goes out and has another monster season next year, the price tag is only going up, not down, because the cap keeps rising and more receivers are signing massive extensions that reset the market every few months. Let me paint the picture of what this means financially because the numbers actually matter here, and they explain why the Cowboys might be making a calculated gamble that could backfire big time. The franchise tag for next season, if they use it again, would jump to about $32.7 million because of the 20% escalator that comes with consecutive tags. And while that's a big number, it's still doable for Dallas if they want to keep this going another year. But here's where it gets really interesting. The third franchise tag in 2028 would skyrocket to around $47 million with zero flexibility for the cap. And I just cannot see Jerry Jones being willing to pay that kind of non-negotiable number when it hamstrings everything else they're trying to do. So the Cowboys are essentially betting that they can evaluate this player for one more year and either sign him to a long-term deal next offseason or let him walk if he doesn't live up to expectations or gets into any kind of trouble. The front office clearly wants to see consistency. They want to see maturity. They want to see another 1,300-yard type season before they commit $40 million per year in guarantees. And from a business standpoint, I actually understand the logic, even though I know it's going to frustrate a lot of fans who just want to see the star players locked up. But here's what worries me about this whole approach. The relationship between the player and the organization could get rocky real fast, especially if he feels disrespected by not getting the extension after a huge year. We've already seen reports that the team has no assurances about when or if he's going to show up for the offseason workout program, which kicks off Monday, and honestly, I'd be shocked if we see him there. The player hasn't signed his franchise tender yet, and technically you can't participate in team activities until you're under contract, so there's a built-in excuse for staying away that doesn't officially count as a holdout. His agent is too smart to let him show up and risk injury before getting long-term security, and I think the over-under for his arrival is probably closer to training camp at the earliest, maybe even into the regular season if things get contentious. This is where the Cowboys are walking a tightrope because you want your best players bought in and participating in the offense during the spring and summer so they're ready week one. But when you franchise tag a guy who's looking for generational wealth, you're basically telling him business over loyalty and he's going to respond accordingly. Now let's talk about what this means for the draft, because the Cowboys keeping their options open is the headline that should be getting more attention right now. Jerry and Steven made comments about taking the best player available, not reaching for need, and comparing the situation to when they drafted CeeDee Lamb, even though they already had Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup, which tells me they're absolutely comfortable taking another weapon early if the board falls that way. The name I keep hearing connected to Dallas in the first round is a receiver out of Arizona State, and multiple reports from national and local media say the Cowboys are extremely high on him, and if he's sitting there at pick 12, I could absolutely see them pulling the trigger. That would be a wild move considering they just tagged their current star, but it would also be classic Jerry Jones, big swing, high risk, high reward, and it gives them insurance in case the tagged player walks next year. However, I think it's more likely that receiver is gone before 12, and the Cowboys end up going defense, which is what most of the fan base is begging for anyway. But the fact that they're even considering offense tells you they're not locked into any one plan. Here's the broader question we need to ask as Cowboys fans. Is the front office handling this situation correctly, or are they repeating the same mistakes we've seen with other star players in the past? You could argue that letting guys play on the tag gives you flexibility and leverage and keeps you from overpaying based on one good season, but you could also argue that it creates drama and uncertainty and sends a message to the locker room that even if you ball out, you still might not get paid. Think about the message this sends to young players grinding their way up the roster. It says, even if you have a career year, the Cowboys might make you prove it again before they commit, and that can breed resentment. On the flip side, the business side of the NFL is ruthless, and the Jones family didn't build a multi-billion-dollar franchise by handing out bad contracts, so maybe this is just smart business, and the player needs to accept it and go earn his money. Personally, I'm torn because I see both sides, but my gut tells me that if you believe in a player after a monster season, you pay him before the market resets even higher, and you lock in that relationship before it gets messy. The other factor we can't ignore is what the market looks like right now and what it might look like next offseason, because receiver contracts are absolutely exploding. Just recently, we saw another massive extension get done that reset the market again, and if the trend continues, we're going to see even more guys pushing $40 million per year by next spring. The player the Cowboys tagged was reportedly asking to surpass a certain tier of receiver contracts, and maybe the front office thought that was too rich for their blood right now, but if he has another elite season, that asking price is only going up by 3, 4, 5, maybe even $6 million per year, so the Cowboys are gambling that they can either sign him next year at a higher number if he proves it again, or move on if he doesn't, but that gamble only works if you have a backup plan, and right now I'm not sure what that backup plan is unless they draft someone early or make a big move in free agency next year. Let's also talk about the locker room dynamics, because this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum, and other players are watching how the Cowboys treat their stars. If you're a young guy on a rookie deal seeing a star get tagged instead of extended, you're taking notes on how the organization does business, and that can affect future negotiations and relationships. The Cowboys have to balance being smart with the cap and being loyal to the guys who produce, and it's a tough line to walk, especially when you're trying to build a championship culture. Championship teams usually have their core locked up on long-term deals so everyone can focus on football instead of contracts, but Dallas is choosing a different path here, and we're about to find out if it works or if it blows up in their face. The best-case scenario is the player shows up ready to ball out, has another monster year, and signs a long-term deal next offseason with both sides happy, but the worst-case scenario is drama all summer, a slow start to the season, distractions in the locker room, and the player walking in free agency with Dallas getting nothing in return. And the crazy part is this is all happening right before the draft, which is just days away, and the Cowboys are still sitting at pick 12 trying to figure out their board while also managing this contract situation in the background. Do you take a receiver high even though you just tagged your star, or do you go defense and trust that the tagged player is going to be motivated to prove himself and earn that long-term deal next year? Would you take a defensive player who can start day one and help fix the issues on that side of the ball, or would you double down on offense and keep adding weapons for your quarterback? These are the questions the front office is wrestling with right now, and honestly, I don't envy them because there's no perfect answer. What I do know is that Cowboys fans are passionate and divided on this issue, and the comments are going to be spicy. So let me ask you straight up, do you think the Cowboys are handling this correctly, yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Another angle to consider is the psychological aspect of making a player prove it again after he already had a breakout year, because that can go one of two ways. Either it lights a fire under him and he plays with a chip on his shoulder and balls out even harder, or it creates resentment and he starts looking ahead to free agency and his effort dips. The front office is clearly betting on the first outcome. They're betting that this player is wired to compete and that he'll use the tag as motivation to go earn an even bigger payday. But that's a gamble, because not every player responds the same way to perceived disrespect. Some guys thrive on that energy, and some guys shut down mentally and start worrying about injury risk and their future instead of focusing on the game. The Cowboys have to hope they know their player well enough to predict how he's going to handle this, because if they're wrong, it could derail the entire season before it even starts. Here's another wrinkle. The Cowboys have been pretty willing to use the franchise tag in recent years, and while it gives them short-term flexibility, it also limits their long-term cap planning, because that tag number is guaranteed and can't be restructured like a regular contract can. If you sign a guy to a long-term deal, you can spread the cap hit out over multiple years, play with void years, add signing bonuses, and create flexibility. But with the tag, you're stuck with that full cap hit in 1 year, and it limits what else you can do. So yeah, the tag number this year is around 27 million, but that's 27 million of dead cap space that could have been managed differently if they'd done a long-term extension with a lower first-year cap hit. The Cowboys are sacrificing future flexibility for short-term evaluation, and that's a choice that could come back to bite them if they need to make moves later in the season or next offseason. Now, I want to shift gears for a second and talk about what this means for the upcoming season, because we're not just talking about contracts and cap space, we're talking about wins and losses and playoff hopes. If the tagged player shows up on time and ready to roll, this offense could be absolutely explosive again, because we saw what he can do when he's locked in and motivated, and pairing him with the other weapons on this team makes the Cowboys one of the most dangerous offenses in the league. But if he holds out or shows up late or plays hesitant because he's worried about injury, the entire offensive game plan could be thrown off, and we could be looking at a slow start that puts Dallas in a hole they can't climb out of. And the division is going to be tough. The schedule is brutal, and the Cowboys can't afford to waste games early while they sort out contract drama. So the pressure is on both sides to figure this out and get everyone on the same page. Let's not forget that the coaching staff is also in a tough spot here, because they're trying to install their system-run OTAs and training camp and build chemistry, but they might be doing it without one of their best players for weeks or even months. How do you game plan for the season when you don't know if your star is going to be there week one or if he's going to be rusty from missing all the offseason work? The coaches need reps, they need timing, they need to build trust, and all of that gets harder when you have a key player sitting out because of a contract dispute. This is where the front office decision directly impacts the coaching staff and the rest of the roster, and it's not fair to put the coaches in that position, but that's the reality of the business side of football. What really gets me is that the Cowboys had months to work on this deal. They knew the deadline was coming. They knew the player was going to want an extension after his big year, and yet here we are days before the draft with nothing done, and the front office announcing they're not even going to try. That tells me either the asking price was way too high and the two sides were never close, or the Cowboys made a strategic decision early on that they weren't going to negotiate no matter what, and they stuck to it. Either way, it's a bold move, and it's going to define the next year of this franchise one way or another. If it works and the player has another great year and signs a team-friendly deal next offseason, Jerry and Steven look like geniuses. But if it backfires and the player leaves or the season falls apart because of drama, they're going to take a ton of heat from the fan base and the media. Before we wrap this up, I want to make sure you're subscribed to this channel, because we're going to be all over the draft, all over the offseason moves, and all over every update with this contract situation as it develops. So hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. We're going to have mock drafts, breaking news, reactions, post-draft analysis, and everything else you need to stay locked in on your Dallas Cowboys. This is the most important offseason in years, and you don't want to miss a single update, so make sure you're subscribed and part of the community we're building here. Looking ahead, the next few weeks are going to be absolutely critical, because the draft is going to give us clues about how the front office is really thinking and whether they're planning for life after this player or doubling down on the current core. If they take a receiver early, that's a signal. If they go defense, that's a different signal. And if they trade back or make some wild move, that's a whole other conversation. Then we've got the off-season workout program starting Monday, and we'll see who shows up and who doesn't. And that's going to set the tone for training camp and the entire season. Every decision the Cowboys make from here on out is connected to this franchise tag situation and how they're managing the short term versus the long term vision for this team. Here's my final take on this whole thing. I understand the business decision. I understand wanting to see consistency before you hand out a massive contract. And I understand protecting yourself from overpaying based on one season. But I also think there's value in locking up your guys when you have them and building that loyalty and trust that creates championship cultures. The Cowboys are walking a fine line, and they better hope they know what they're doing, because the margin for error in the NFC is razor thin, and you can't afford to have internal drama distracting from the main goal, which is winning playoff games and competing for championships. The tagged player is talented. There's no question about that. But talent alone doesn't win in this league. You need chemistry. You need focus. You need everyone pulling in the same direction. And contract disputes have a way of pulling teams apart instead of bringing them together. So we'll see how this plays out. But I'm definitely concerned about the potential fallout if things go sideways. Would you have given him the long-term deal, or are you on board with the franchise tag strategy? Let me know in the comments right now. I want to hear from you, because Cowboys Nation is divided on this one, and I want to know where you stand. Drop your thoughts, your predictions, your concerns, everything in the comments, and let's have a real conversation about what's best for this team moving forward. This is a huge moment for the franchise, and how it unfolds is going to determine whether we're talking about Super Bowl runs or wasted opportunities a year from now. So let's talk about it.